Swami Srila Prabhupada ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Gaur Pimanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I thought it'd be nice to kind of run parallel with what the Farmington Hills Temple is doing with the Bhagavatam. So since it was Sunday, we discussed 3:24:34. So this morning we're going to discuss 3:24:35 and 36. Because 35 was yesterday and 36 is this morning for them, I assume. So this is 35 is Kapila Dev responding to what Cardama Muni said to him in text 34 and going back in time. So in 34, Cardama Muni was asking, "Today I have something to ask from you, who are the Lord of all living entities. Since I have now been liberated by you from my debt to my father," the debt to his father is Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma had made a request of service. He fulfilled that request of service to his father. And since all my desires are fulfilled, I wish to accept the order of an itinerant mendicant. He's asking permission from the Personality of Godhead to take leave of the Personality of Godhead. So that's what we discussed. I wish to wander about, free from lamentation, thinking always of you in my heart. So text 35 translation and then purport. The Personality of Godhead Kapila said, whatever I speak, whether directly or in the scriptures, is authoritative in all respects for the people of the world, O Muni, because I told you before that I would become your son, I have descended to fulfill this truth. So he's confirming what was already understood. Cardama Muni is a very special person. The Lord appeared to him in the midst of the forest where he was doing his meditation. Now he's confirming, yes, I promised, and here I am. I'm that same Lord Vishnu. I appeared as your son, as I promised. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Cardama Muni was to leave his family life to completely engage in the service of the Lord. But since he knew that the Lord himself as Kapila had taken birth in his home as his own son, why was he preparing to leave home? To search out self-realization or God-realization. God himself was present in his home. Why should he leave home? Such a question may certainly arise. But here it is said that whatever is spoken in the Vedas and whatever is practiced in accordance with the injunctions of the Vedas is to be accepted as authoritative in society. Vedic authority says that a householder must leave home after his 50th year. pancha shordvam vanam vrajet, one must leave his family life and enter the forest after the age of 50. This is an authoritative statement of the Vedas based on the division of the social life into 4 departments of activity: brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyas. Paragraph. Cardama Muni practiced yoga very rigidly as a brahmachari before his marriage, and he became so powerful and attained so much mystic power that his father Brahma ordered him to marry and beget children as a householder. Cardama did that also, semicolon. He begot 9 good daughters and 1 son, Kapila Muni, and thus his householder duty was also performed nicely, and now his duty was to leave. Although he had the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his son, he had to respect the authority of the Vedas. This is a very important lesson. Even if one has God in his home as his son, he should still follow the Vedic injunctions. It is stated, Mahajano yena katasa panta, one should traverse the path which is followed by great personalities. 3rd paragraph. Cardama Muni's example is very instructive, for in spite of having the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his son, he left home just to obey the authority of the Vedic injunction. Cardama Muni states here the main purpose of his leaving home, while traveling all over the world as a mendicant, he would always remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead within his heart and thereby be freed from all the anxieties of material existence. In this age of Kali Yuga, sannyas is prohibited because persons in this age are all Shudras and cannot follow the rules and regulations of sannyas life. It is very commonly found that so-called sannyasis are addicted to nonsense, even to having private relationships with women. This is the abominable situation in this age. Although they dress themselves as sannyasis, they still cannot free themselves from the 4 principles of sinful life, namely illicit sex, life, meat eating, intoxication, and gambling. Since they are not freed from these 4 principles, they are cheating the public by posing as swamis. Final paragraph. In Kali Yuga, the injunction is that no one should accept sannyas. Of course, those who act, but Prabhupada accepted sannyas, so what's he doing? Of course, those who actually follow the rules and regulations must take sannyas. Generally, however, people are unable to accept sannyas life, and therefore Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stressed, Kalau nasyeva 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 gatir anyata. In this age, there is no other alternative than to chant the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. The main purpose of sannyas life is to be in constant companionship with the Supreme Lord, either by thinking of him within the heart or hearing of him through oral reception. In this age, hearing is more important than thinking, because one's thinking may be disturbed by mental agitation, but if one concentrates on hearing, he will be forced to associate with the sound vibration of Krishna. Krishna and the sound vibration Krishna are non-different. So if one loudly vibrates Hare Krishna, he'll be able to think of Krishna immediately. This process of chanting is the best process of self-realization in this age. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya preached it so nicely for the benefit of all humanity. Now, from the temple, that was yesterday's verse, and the temple, the morning's verse is text 36. I'm going to read that also. My appearance in this world is especially to explain the philosophy of Sankhya, which is highly esteemed for self-realization by those desiring freedom from the entanglement of unnecessary material desires. Purport. Here the word durashayat is very significant. Dur refers to trouble or dukkha, miseries. Ashayat means from the shelter. We, conditioned souls, have taken shelter of the material body, which is full of troubles and miseries. Foolish people cannot understand the situation, and this is called ignorance, illusion, or the spell of Maya. Human society should very seriously understand that the body itself is the source of all miserable life. Modern civilization is supposed to be making advancement in scientific knowledge, but what is this scientific knowledge? It is based on bodily comforts only, without knowledge that, however comfortably one maintains his body, the body is destructible. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, Antavanta ime deha. These bodies are destined to be destroyed. Nisyas yokta sharidana refers to the living soul or the living spark within the body. That soul is eternal, but the body is not eternal. For our activity, we must have a body. Without sense organs, there is no activity, but people are not inquiring whether it is possible to have an eternal body. Actually, they aspire for an eternal body because even though they engage in sense enjoyment, that sense enjoyment is not eternal. They are therefore in want of something which they can enjoy eternally, but they do not understand how to attain that perfection. Sankhya philosophy, therefore, as stated herein by Kapila Dev, is tat tvanam. The Sankhya philosophy system is designed to afford understanding of the real truth. What is that real truth? The real truth is knowledge of how to get out of the material body, which is the source of all trouble. Lord Kapila's incarnation or descent is especially meant for this purpose. That is clearly stated here. Srimad Bhagavatam, the essence of Srimad Bhagavatam is to bring our attention fully concentrated upon the personality of Godhead. And the method is sound vibration. And hearing properly means that's where the mind goes, is to the personality of Godhead. We hear from the Bhagavatam that Krishna is the fountainhead of all incarnations. Recently I heard one class where Prabhupada was explaining why he used the head part, personality of God, head. There may be different reasons, but this particular occasion Prabhupada was saying it indicates a person. God head, because the person has a head, and somebody else may have a conception of God without a head or without a form. Anyway, that's one explanation that he offered. And this original personality of Godhead has various incarnations, and those various incarnations, according to time, place, circumstance, they're descending with a purpose. Here we're hearing very clearly Kapila Dev expressing, revealing the purpose, and then the purpose of that purpose. So the purpose is to reveal Sankhya. The purpose of Sankhya is to free the living entity from the bodily conception. Now, it doesn't end there. And the bodily conception, then what? So when we hear in this is chapter 24. In chapter 26, that's where Sankhya comes, because that's where he's instructing Devahuti, fulfilling the purpose of his appearing, instructing Sankhya. And the Sankhya, traditionally, Sankhya is considered an analysis of categories of matter and categories of spirit. So many categories of matter, and over there is the categories of spirit, and we belong to the category of spirit. That's who we are. So there's the disassociation or discrimination by analysis of we're not matters over there and we're in another category. The Sanskrit word that's used here is tattvanam. Tattva nam. Of the truths, tattvanam. So tattva, the truths of, well, transcendence. So at the end of that chapter 26, it's important to understand when Kapila Deva's revealing Sankhya, or when we're studying Sankhya, and it's very involved, and it's very scientific. What's at the end of that path of Sankhya? And he just summarizes it quickly, 2 quick verses. Meditation upon Sat, or the who we are, and then engaging in service to the Param Satyam Dhimahi, but also service to. So devotional service is in 3 chapters. 1 chapter is Sankhya, but Sankhya is meant to bring one to detachment from illusion and attachment to tattva, and then engagement in service to Paratattva, devotional service. So devotional service comes before the Sankhya section, then comes the Sankhya section, and then 2 more chapters on devotional service. So while he's descending in this verse, it's saying his purpose is to disseminate Sankhya. And then what is Sankhya? What's the purpose of Sankhya? So Sankhya is discriminating. It's a function of the intellect to discern this from that, one thing from another thing. And then once that discernment is done, then what? It's not just identify with Sat and your business is over. Like I am Sat, Om Tat Sat. That's it. So, but there's more details, please. Sat means eternal, and then there's Param Satyam, and that's what Srimad Bhagavatam, Param Satyam Dhimahi. We know the first verse, the concluding phrase in 111 Bhagavatam, Param Satyam Dhimahi. So if you're going to Dhimahi or meditate on Param Satyam, that comes after understanding what is Sat and what is Asat, and then Para Satyam, Param Satyam, Dhimahi. And that meditation leads to service. This is Satya Yuga. This is at the very dawn of a particular day of Brahma. Not necessarily the life of Brahma, but a particular day of Brahma. And the day of Brahma begins in similar fashion. One day, the next day. That was a question yesterday. If the things happen in each successive day of Brahma, the same. They're similar, just like when the sun rises. It's similar, but some mornings it's like this, and some mornings it's like that. So, the beginning of the day of Brahma, it's Satya Yuga. And the process for achieving perfection in Satya Yuga is meditation. So Cardama is going to go do meditation, but he's not going to stop there. He'll, within the heart, in that process of meditation, those who are perfect in the process of meditation, on the spiritual platform, their meditation is in terms of service to the Supreme. For example, the nice description that's found in Nectar Devotion. One elder Brahmin who was poor, hearing a class, hearing just discourse on the absolute truth, understood that worship, one of the ways of worship is one can worship within the mind, manasa puja. Now, if you have the capacity and facility, which he didn't, then you worship according to your capacity, with whatever capacity and facility. But he decided, I'm old and I can't gather, so let me do my puja within the mind, and elaborately every day for hours in his mind he was doing puja to his deity. And you know the story. At one day when he was doing his puja, he was cooking and he was making sweet rice, and he wanted to see if it was cool enough to offer to his deity, which was in his mind, and he put his finger in the sweet rice to see if it was cool enough, and his finger burned because it wasn't cool enough. And that startled him. And when he startled, his meditation broke. And when his meditation broke, he looked up in the sky, and there was a Vaikuntha Vimana descending to take him to Vaikuntha. So, through Manasa Puja, he purified himself. Although he wasn't engaging his external senses, he was engaging the subtle internal sense. So when we're engaging the external senses, we should also engage the subtle sense. Not, the mind is somewhere else in the external senses. This was our mechanical discussion yesterday. How to not do our service mechanically or chant mechanically. So the mind must be absorbed in the activity. I was thinking further about the discussion yesterday. How do you get the mind absorbed in your service? Supposing there's a tendency, and you follow that tendency of mechanically or dutifully doing something. It's certainly possible to dutifully do something, and the mind is not really present. The mindfulness element is somewhere else. It's certainly possible. In fact, it's the standard practice for neophytes. So what to do? Which is the question yesterday. I was thinking some further about it. In that verse given by Rupa Goswami, the mindfulness happens when, particularly in chanting, when the ear is hearing. We'll say it negatively. If the ear is not hearing, you're not going to have mindfulness. We'll say it positively. If you're hearing, there's mindfulness. Because then the sound that you're hearing goes to the heart. How to chant from the heart. Hear. Mechanical, don't hear. Dutifully, the mouth is going and the ear is not hearing. Or intermittently hearing, but not hearing. And if you're hearing, something happens, it goes to the heart. And when it goes to the heart, the mind becomes conquered. Yay! Try to conquer the mind otherwise. Good luck. And by conquering the mind, because of hearing, the senses become inert. The senses become inert doesn't mean the external senses, it means the internal senses. The sense of sight, the sense of hearing, the sense of smell, the sense of touch, the subtle senses. Or following the yoga system, that's pratyahara. What's pratyahara? It's a stage in the Eightfold Yoga system where the subtle senses are withdrawn. After having done the first 4, comes number 5. And when number 4 are accomplished, then number 5 can be accomplished. And then dhyan, dharana, samadhi, the mind can be focused. So for us, Hare Krishna folks, the Hare Krishna mantra should be heard, chanted, and heard. So that means the ear has to be active. For the ear to be active, there has to be consciousness invested in the hearing process, mindfulness in the hearing process. Or if you slacken in the consciousness or the mindfulness, you're not going to hear. And the mind's not going to be conquered, and the mind's going to rule and go wherever it wants to go while you're mechanically chanting. And that's kind of, standard for neophyte or beginning stages. So that's fine. Dutifully chant. And consciously hear. And the mind becomes conquered. And then you're chanting from the heart, and you're receiving from the heart. And there's a heart-to-heart relationship or exchange between ourselves and that sound vibration, which is not different than Krishna. Or the same with Srimad Bhagavatam. It's not mechanical. The mechanical is the let me study, etc. Like, something that we might do otherwise, like academic or something. How to get, all this spaghetti all over the floor here to work and get the sound system to work, and that's useful, but then there's the purposefulness behind. Same with anything. Maintaining your house or keeping things clean or something. The purpose of it. There's this question yesterday about thinking further about it. The Swadharma. What's the purpose of Swadharma? The preliminary purpose of Swadharma is to connect one's psychophysical nature with the Supreme. And while my interest may be me, Swadharma means to connect the psychophysical nature with the Supreme, that is to purify, regulate, direct under the authority of the Vedas, and to purify. That's how Vedic injunctions work. It's submission to Krishna, which comes in the form of codes of the Vedas of how to regulate my life. It's not the regulation per se, it's the submission to the regulation that's coming from the Supreme Person. And as that regulation unto the Supreme Person becomes effective, because I'm conscious of the submission to the Supreme, not just mechanically being religious, but submission to the Supreme, then the Paradharma starts to elevate. And then Paradharma rules, while one still is engaging in Swadharma, or my duties as a whatever, Varna and Ashram situation might be. The Bhagavatam is that Paradharma. That's what it says in the very first verse. Savai Punksang Paro Dharmo, in the first chapter, second chapter also. This Bhagavatam is Paradharma. Paradharma doesn't negate or overlook or discourage Swadharma. They've seamlessly fit together. However, the Swadharma has a purpose, and it's to bring one closer to Paradharma. And hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is to elevate Paradharma directly, regardless of one's Swadharma. Everyone's eligible. All souls are eligible. Or it's an equal opportunity organization. Hearing Srimad Bhagavatam is for everybody. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Everyone should hear Srimad Bhagavatam. Even if one doesn't understand, yes, even if one doesn't understand. The little microbes in the air, the insects and bugs and whatever they are, there's spiritual benefit going to them because they're also a spirit soul. They may not understand, that's okay. That sound vibration is beneficial for all living entities, especially beneficial for the human form, and especially beneficial for the human that's, we can say, trying to understand or trying to hear attentively, using Prabhupada's phrase, ardent hearing. And then that what's behind that ardentness, making our connection. Again, making our connection. Supposing that's not my mindfulness, hear anyways. And as one hears, learn the art of the purpose behind that hearing. And as purification takes place gradually, then the possibility increases of hearing with the right purpose, hearing with purpose, and hearing with the right purpose, or restoring one's relationship. So Kapila Dev has appeared as the son of Cardama Muni. The first verse is, as I promised, so I fulfilled that promise. Now he hasn't said, yes, go ahead yet, but it's a preamble for revealing his identity. You can't get any better than the personality of Godhead revealing his identity and his purposes. And there's many nice little points, like, in addition, like clearly expressed by Kapila Dev, by Cardama Muni, is a big part of what he was doing was fulfilling an obligation to his father. And the obligation to his father was become a Prajapati. Now he didn't become a Prajapati and produce millions of offspring, but he produced that which these 9 daughters. And of course, Kapila Dev didn't become a Prajapati, he remained a renunciate through his life. But the 9 daughters, they went to town, married to the sages and many. So he had his function, and his debt to his father was fulfilled. And now he's looking to go forward with his meditation upon the personality of Godhead within the core of his heart, to demonstrate and fulfill one of the purposes of the Vedas. So he's very dharmic. And one can say transcendentally the same. Well, if it's transcendentally the same, then going to the forest and meditating on the Supreme Lord and having the Supreme Lord in his home as his son is the same, because they're transcendently the same. So why is he doing it if he has the person? So he's doing it because it's a duty, and he's a follower of Dharma. Now that's a Swadharma. It's a Grahasta's duty, Swadharma, with that particular ashram, to enter that stage. That's a Swadharma that's subservient to Paradharma. So it's certainly, say it the other way, supposing he didn't leave, would it be in violation of Swadharma? If he is fixed in Paradharma, then it's okay if he doesn't go. But he's going because he's performing that kind of Paradharma, that is demonstrating to the world, setting the example to the world of his Swadharma, setting that standard and example. Because otherwise, people might not have that qualification that he has and do as he did. Stay, just see. So I'm going to stay too. It's subtle. So within things that are subtle, there's variety. It's not like only one, and if there's only one, then there's anything else is to be discarded. What he did with it, what he did for a purpose that's explained. And Kapila Dev is now indicating his identity, his purpose, 1, fulfill a promise, 2, teach Sankhya. And then what's the purpose of Sankhya? It's to detach one from the misconceptions. And then what's the purpose of the freeing one from the misconceptions? Then engage in the proper conception. And what's that? It's devotional service to the personality of Godhead. So he's going to be teaching that as well. So that you can say, I end with this, Sankhya has its subsets. Sankhya standing alone looks like it's just analysis. But Sankhya, when it's not just a subset, in its complete form, it's detachment so that one can engage in one's actual identity as a spirit soul fully engaged in the service of the Supreme Soul, in devotional service. A subset of Sankhya, properly done, is bhakti. Very similar, different, but very similar to Bhagavad Gita. The introduction in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, is Sankhya. And then, Buddhi, or Bhakti. Then it happens again in chapter 7, then it happens again in chapter 13. So Sankhya is a fundamental tattva, understanding the truths of all things in their relation with the source of those things. And then, what do you do with that? Avideya. You engage in devotional service. So the term Sankhya indicates, there's a tendency to indicate that it means something. That is the analysis part. One more time, but expanding what its full meaning is, it's more than just the analysis part. It's the then acting accordingly, and then becoming matured in that acting accordingly. It's devotional service up to the stage of perfection. That's the complete picture of Sankhya. And Kapila is saying, he appeared for that purpose. So Cardama was going to go his way, Kapila is going to go his way. And it's going to come up shortly. As after he's gone, Devahuti is going to ask and he's going to give so that we can receive. See if there's some discussion.
Okay. Maharaj, I have some questions from yesterday's class.
Okay.
Last night. The first two are in relation to Narad Muni's life. I was wondering, as far as the information we have about his life, we don't hear anything about his lives before the one where his, where described where his mother died from a snake bite.
There's something rattling around in the back of my memory that says it's It's something is said somewhere, but I can't remember right now. Anybody in the room remember? No. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. The other question is, I have some recollection of an understanding that when a devotee dies and is ready to go back to the spiritual world, he takes one more birth in the material world where he is engaged in Krishna's pastimes. And I don't know the reference for this, but I have a recollection of learning this. And when we heard about Narad Muni, if I recall, last night you described that he was unmanifest.
No.
Or before he became Lord Brahma's son.
No, he wasn't unmanifest. So, clarification. 2 points. He didn't just go to Vaikuntha, he took part in Krishna's pastimes. Second, the expression is given that when he left his body as this maidservant's son, when in an old age, you've seen the painting, he's like leaning against a wall, and the form of Narada is not as lightning and thunder, but as lightning and illumination occurs simultaneously. The spiritual form of Narada Muni manifests. And the statement is, that the description goes, that happened at the end of Brahma's day. And during the night of Brahma, in that spiritual form, doesn't give any expanded explanation, so don't ask me. He was in that spiritual form, within the body of Vishnu. And then, in that form of Narada, he appeared from the body of Brahma. Spiritual body, not a material body, from the body of Brahma. And then for the duration of that Brahma's, our current Brahma's day, Narada Muni. It doesn't say what happens at the end of Brahma's day when it comes the next night. Where I've not come across any explanation, maybe somewhere. But so during the night of Brahma, somehow, in that same form as Narada, he's in the body of Vishnu. Vishnu means Garbhodakshay Vishnu. And during the next day of Brahma, he's in the body of Garbhodakshay Vishnu. In the next day of Brahma, he manifests as the son of Brahma. Now there's lots of steps, and there's a lot of time, and he's in a spiritual form. So that leads to many questions. Like, I thought, this is one of my questions that I don't have an answer to. I thought living entities that enter into the body of Garbhodakshay Vishnu during the night of Brahma, the partial annihilation that comes at the night of Brahma, those living entities don't have form. They're just living entities because their physical bodies have been withdrawn and they go back to their elemental stage. As the elements, so also their bodies are dissolved. So are there other living entities with spiritual forms in the body of Garbhodakshay Vishnu along with Narada? Like, what's it like in there? That's a kid's curiosity question, but that's one of my curiosity questions. I don't have the answer. All that I know is what the Bhagavatam tells us, and what the Bhagavatam tells us is presumably referenced from some other portion of the Vedas that says that Narada in his spiritual form was within the body of Garbhodaksha Vishnu for the duration of Brahma's night. And then manifested in his, you could say, adult feature as Narada Muni from the body of Lord Brahma directly. Does that answer your question? Kind of, but so you have some more.
Well, I think it's just interesting. It's more curiosity. Interesting how my understanding of going back to Godhead, is like you go back to Godhead, but he got his spiritual form in this world.
He got his spiritual form in this world.
Brahma,
Well, he had a spiritual form even before he appeared as Narada Muni. So directly, when the soul was released from the body of that son of the maidservant, doesn't even give his name, didn't give her name either. But when the soul was released, the spiritual form was at once, simultaneously manifest. That's the description. Now, is that ordinary? Spiritual form is spiritual form. And he had a spiritual form, and it was manifest. So, going back to your question, going back to God, does that mean everybody that goes back? Let's take, for example, it's not always the same in simple terms. For example, in the Bhagavatam, when the Pandavas, quote, went back to Godhead, they did so in the self-same body. Or, another example, when Dhruva Maharaj, at the end of his life, what happened? There's Mom in another Vimana, and there's him in his Vimana, and he's waving Haribol, Mom, and they're off they go. So it sounds like the self-same body. All the artwork is done like that, but it doesn't say specifically. In other words, there's diversity of what happens, the going back to Godhead journey. So keep being curious.
That's right. I have another question.
Go ahead.
Also. This question came from the teenagers that we read Bhagavatam together, and it's a little bit difficult for me to even ask the question. I'm not really sure, so if you could be patient as I try to formulate what was being asked. I think part of the question is there a relationship between what platform a person is on in terms of bhava, prema, like this, and which part of the spiritual world that one will go back to? So this is making an assumption that one does not need to be on prema level to go back to the spiritual world. But if somebody's in bhava, does it mean that they will only reach the Vaikuntha planets? And in order to go to Goloka, do they have to be a prema? And this question is also related to what is the definition of a pure devotee, and because apparently, we need to be pure to go back to Godhead or to the spiritual world, right?
Well, one scriptural source to go to respond to this question is Madhurya Kandambini. And the specific section of Madhurya Kandambini is the comparison of anartha nivritti becomes complete in the prema stage. So the whole chapter dealing with anartha nivritti towards the end, you can read. only at the prema stage are anarthas completely eradicated. Now, can there be exceptions? Sure. But the rule, rather than the exceptions, is pure means prema. Pure means anarthas are not almost gone or almost completely gone, but gone. That's the prema stage. Again, can there be exceptions? Sure. But the rule is, the prema stage is that eligibility. Now, can one say, the answer to this question is yes. Can one say that one is a pure devotee who has attained the bhava stage? Yes. And then you start to dissect or get little micro analytical and say, almost. But one can also say pure, because the personality of Godhead, seeing he bestows bhava, but when that bhava is there, rather quickly, the transition, it goes from the bhava to the prema stage. But they're not identical, otherwise it would be different nomenclature. And to such persons who want to hear more about it, I would say, Prabhu, let's work on good sadhana. Because it's nice to have a sense of what those higher stages are. It's inspiring to have a sense of what those higher stages are. But it can become just an intellectual exercise and not really touching the heart. So if you want to go further with your understanding of these details, whatever our acharyas have made clear, you can read that. And meanwhile, work on perfecting the sadhana stage. Start with offenseless chanting. That's a good place to start. Otherwise, it's information, information, information. No transformation. So it's not, the message here is not shut down such questioning. It's make the questioning relevant specifically to spiritual elevation, one's spiritual elevation. Applied spiritual technology. iFest. Something else?
I can ask another question.
Okay.
If somebody decides to leave the practice of bhakti, does it necessarily imply that they have committed some offenses?
Doesn't necessarily mean that's the reason.
Okay.
It could, sensual weakness is not the same as offense. It can happen because of sensual weakness.
Mm-hmm.
Something else? Yes?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, the text 34 which we read in the Family.
Yeah.
So in the end, like Cardama Muni says, renouncing the family life, I wish to wander free from lamentation. So I was just thinking lamentation is something like we are attached to something and we fear of losing it or fear. So the lamentation is there, for, at least for a lot of, I'm stuck with the emotion of the lamentation for something. How do I get free from that?
You know the answer, but it's becoming attached to transcendence. When you're attached, when that wonderful day comes, that there's fixed attachment to transcendence, then detachment from other things follows. Viraktir anyatra syat. Syat means arises. Viraktir anyatra. So detachment from the fear of loss will come when there's detachment from the object. as well as so to gaining or losing. Na shochati, na kangsati. So it's there, when there's attachment to transcendence or attachment to the object, Krishna, and otherwise it's going to linger, at least residually.
Yeah, I was just like thinking that, yeah, I can understand that. I'm inclined going towards that, but still I have that attachment.
You're just being honest. Who doesn't? With somebody that says, I don't, is not being honest. You're honest. And you're maybe stronger or maybe specific or something. But back to her question, up to the stage of prema, it's there. So you're not in prema bhakti yet. That's all and another way of saying what you're saying is you're not in prema bhakti yet. Okay. You're honest. Now what? Continue. Use the thorn to remove the thorn. You know that example. So the attachment to the temporary and the fear of losing that which I'm attached to, use that to remove the thorn. That means, that which you're attached to, see how that can be utilized in service of Krishna.
So if you are attached to a person...
Well, just, let's say you're attached to your son, or you're attached to your husband, you're attached to a person. So that be spiritualized by the meditation and practical activity following that meditation, that Krishna should be pleased. So you're using the thorn to remove the thorn. And it's easier said than done, but that's the process. My dear Lord Krishna, I'm very attached. I mean, it's what Devahuti is saying. I'm very attached to my husband. He's gone. Help. What do I do? Anyone else? Online.
Vanaprastha at 50. Is it still applicable in Kali Yuga?
Is which?
Vanaprastha at 50.
Vanaprastha at 50. Why not? There are people doing it? Not so much. Is it applicable? Why not?
The question continues. How can we prepare for Vanaprastha and Kali Yuga? Please guide us.
Advance in Krishna consciousness and read Prabhupada's books. It's not just Kapila or Cardama Muni, excuse me. It's it's in there. It's not 3 ashrams. It's 4. Are people doing it? Not commonly. To some degree, by the force of time and nature, to some degree that happens anyways. But the consciousness and the activities behind that conscious or that consciousness is driving may more closely or not resemble what Vanaprastha life is. And it's not a cookie cutter thing. All Vanaprasthas have to fit into this bucket. And if they don't fit into this bucket, they're not Vanaprasthas because they don't fit into this bucket. So there's diversity. But it's a principle. So how do I prepare myself? By following your duties properly in your present stage, whatever that is, say Grihastha stage, and moving towards that. let's take that Prabhupada's example. He was more than 50 when he accepted the Vanaprastha stage. So what does that mean? He was in violation of his own writings. One might say like that. He didn't follow. He's not an acharya because he didn't do what he said. It was, it was circumstantial in his life. And it happened when it happened later. So that's also, it's a principle. It's not the 50-year bell rings and then you have to bail or something like that. Move towards it by proper cultivation in the present situation. How do you prepare for death? Same. Something else? Okay. Yes?
Maharaj, just wanted to clarify my understanding about Swadharma and Paradharma.
About what?
Swadharma and Paradharma.
Okay.
Yadho Bhakti Radhokshaja means like devotional service to the Supreme is Paradharma. Is that how we understand, Maharaj?
That's correct.
And Swadharma is anything, regulation or anything that we do to get there?
Yes. Well, yes, that's it. Let me respond. It's a little bit oversimplified. Prescribed duties is commonly how Prabhupada would translate Swadharma. Prescribed duties means, now supposing I'm let's take the 6 Goswamis. Not just, sadhakas, but, exemplary personalities. We don't hear anything about their wives. They just left. That sounds irresponsible. Poor wives. They just left. No, it doesn't mean they didn't have a conversation. It doesn't mean, there was no exchange. We just don't hear about it. And et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, one may be executing, I tried to make this point, making it again, maybe a little, anyway. One may be engaged in one's Swadharma and simultaneously executing that for the purpose of leveraging Paradharma. And that's the proper Swadharma, is the regulation is for the purpose of purification, and that Vishnu or Krishna, the personality of Godhead, is to be pleased by that dedication, by that sacrifice. So the behind the scenes, or the less visible than the prescribed duties part, is the Paradharma part. I'm doing this for the satisfaction of the Supreme. And then you go to the other end of the spectrum. Supposing one becomes a perfected soul, then whatever I do on the external prescribed duties platform, that's the purpose behind it.
So that means like...
They run parallel.
Yes, Maharaj. So can we say that, even in my current stage also, there can be glimpses of Paradharma?
Yeah, I hope so. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.